द क्रिटिकल पेट्रियट देखने वाले सब दोस्तों को खुशामदीद। आज मेरे साथ शरीक गुफ्तगू हैं प्रोफेसर शिव आनंद कानवी जी। वो इस वक्त महाराष्ट्र के एक गांव में मौजूद हैं। उनका बैकग्राउंड बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है। वो थियोरेटिकल फिजिसिस्ट हैं। इन्होंने आईआईटी से एजुकेशन की, उसके बाद अमेरिका चले गए, वहाँ से तालीम हासिल की और पढ़ाते रहे और फिर बिजनेस जर्नलिस्ट हो गए। तो मैं आज बेसिकली तो बात करना चाह रहा हूँ इंडिया के स्पेस प्रोग्राम के हवाले से और इसरो के हवाले से। इसरो से बनता है इंडियन स्पेस रिसर्च ऑर्गेनाइजेशन और ये इसका हेडक्वार्टर जो है वो बेंगलोर में है और ये 1969 में कायम हुआ। तो शिवानंद जी फरमाइएगा अपनी बैकग्राउंड के हवाले से कुछ और फिर हम इसरो की बात करते हैं, स्पेस प्रोग्राम की बात करते हैं।
Thank you, Shakil ji, for inviting me to be on your program. जैसे आपने कहा, मेरा तालीम हुआ है थ्योरेटिकल फिजिक्स में। मैं एक्चुअली कर्नाटक का एक शहर धारवाड़ करके है, उधर मेरा जन्म हुआ था। उधर ही मेरा एजुकेशन भी बीएससी डिग्री तक उधर ही हुआ था। वो बहुत फेमस है फॉर पोएट्स एंड म्यूजिशियंस। लॉट ऑफ great Hindustani musicians and Kannada poets are from Dharwad. Then from there I went to Kanpur to study in IIT physics, and then from there I went later to United States to Boston to further study theoretical physics, particle physics. Then when I came back, I spent about 2 years in IIT Bombay and Bombay University. And then I left, you can say I left physics and became an economic consultant, later business journalist. And after that, I joined Tata Group in their largest IT company, TCS. And now I'm retired for last 10 years and I continue to write to various magazines and newspapers also. Mostly my area has been science, technology, political economy, and business history, etc. Now, my interaction with the space program started when I became a journalist. Before that, I used to just read it in the newspapers, but I started investigating it, writing about it, meeting the leading scientists in the space program from 93 onwards. That is almost 30 years back. Because their first launch of PSLV, what is called PSLV, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, in 93 had failed. So why it failed, I wanted to know. So I went to meet the scientists later, and they had appointed a fault analysis committee. And so I talked to the scientists after the report came out on what went wrong, etc., etc. So you can say from 93, I've been following the space program, and I've met various chairmen of ISRO, including the legendary Satish Dhawan. Not many people know that it is Satish Dhawan who made what can be called a modern space program for India. I think he was also from West Punjab, if I'm not mistaken, probably studied in Lahore, and later at Caltech, and he was a very internationally known aerospace scientist. And the founder of the India space program was Vikram Sarabhai, as you may be knowing. Mm-hmm. In fact, the vehicle which is going to land on moon soon, probably in late August, is named after him. It will be called Vikram, in memory of Vikram Sarabhai. He first thought of the space program way back in 1962. Now, I don't know if you can see many of these streaming OTT programs from India in Pakistan. Like there is one serial going on in Sony called Rocket Boys. Of course, it is a fictionalized version, but there they have given, they have talked about the life and from student days of Sarabhai, Bhabha, space program, atomic energy program, and so on. Okay, it's a fictionalized version, but it's that has made these names popular among ordinary people also. Now, Sarabhai and Baba were studying in Cambridge, and they in the 20s and 30s, and they were in the cutting edge of physics at that time. Cambridge was a major center for atomic physics and nuclear physics, and these people got interested in the study of cosmic rays. Just then, the Second World War broke out, so they returned to India, and both landed up in Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. Now, Indian Institute of Science is more than 100 years old. It was
Yeah,
founded in 1907 8.
nine
So,
actually.
yeah. And at that time, it was, in fact, it was conceived by Jamshedji Tata. Tata established it.
Yeah.
And it used to be called Tata Institute of Science, but later the government took. And both Sarabhai and Baba joined there. And the Nobel laureate C.V. Raman was also there. In fact, he was the director of the Indian Institute of Science for some time. And there they started again studying cosmic rays. These are the rays, particles which are coming from the cosmos from different parts with very high energy entering Earth's atmosphere. And many elementary particles are part of that. So it is a way of studying particles which are constituents of matter. Because those days they didn't have these large accelerators. Now you must have heard about these large accelerators with billions of dollars they are built, where they smash atoms and produce new particles and so on. These things did exist at that time. So scientists thought of these particles coming from outer space and studying them. That was a much cheaper way of doing these things, and that is what they are called cosmic rays. And Baba and Sarabhai were involved in that in Bangalore. Then later, Sarabhai moved to Ahmedabad, and there he established his own institute called Physical Research Laboratory. Now, Physical Research Laboratory became the, you can say, school for space sciences in India at that time. And many of his PhD students later became chairman of ISRO also, like Kasturi Rangan, UR Rao, and so on. Now, Sarabhai started his experiments there in Ahmedabad after Bangalore. And then he told Baba, who was his friend, we should also start a space program in India. So at that time, since it was a very nascent program, it became part of the atomic energy program. So atomic energy program was being headed by Baba, and within that, in 1962, they started the Indian National Council for Space Research, INCOSPAR, in 1962, and Sarabhai headed it. And they started with small rockets to study what happens near the equator. Now, near the equator, if you go to upper atmosphere, there are lots of there are a lot of high energy particles going around in the ionosphere, and how they are interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, etc. These are all very interesting and important studies. To do that, you have to be very close to the equator, and the only region of India which is close to the equator, closest to the equator, is Kerala. And the end of Kerala called Kanyakumari, which is very close to Sri Lanka. And near that Kanyakumari, they found Sarabhai found a small fishing village called Tumba. There, they on that beach in the Tumba beach, they wanted to start experimenting with rockets. Now, church there. So you can say India's space program started in a church. They went and requested the local bishop. They went and requested and said, "Look, we want to start this program. I think it will be very useful, but you will have to help us convince these fishermen that don't worry about the rockets. It will not harm you, but we also need some space." So bishop was able to convince fishermen in that village, and that's how the India space program started there.
और
And
प्रोफेसर साहब, सॉरी फॉर इंटरप्शन, और ये जो है इंडिया का स्पेस प्रोग्राम, इट स्टार्टेड इन अ वेरी हम्बल वे. मैंने कहीं पढ़ा कि रॉकेट के हिस्से जो है वो साइकिल पर और बैलगाड़ी पर लाए जाते थे.
that is
और
true.
ये
That
जो
is
है,
true.
जी, इसरो जो है, इट वाज एस्टैब्लिश्ड ऑन 15th ऑफ अगस्त 1969. और
Right.
पाकिस्तान का जो स्पेस प्रोग्राम है, स्पेस एजेंसी सुपार्को, इट वाज
Ji.
सेट अप ऑन सितंबर 16, 1961. और
Okay.
मैं ये भी बताता चलूं कि सुपार्को जो है, it has in all it has 1153 employees, और इसरो के जो एम्प्लॉइज हैं उनका नंबर है 16,786
जी
84,
जी
और उनमें से जो है 7,062 यानी 7,062 साइंटिस्ट और इंजीनियर्स हैं। और ये
जी
भी बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग बात है कि just 2% of ISRO engineers are from IITs and NITs.
जी
That's
जी
very interesting also.
जी जी जी. In fact, what you can say is, initially there were people from IIT and NITs in the space program and atomic energy program and so on. But as you know, so very soon, in fact, it is only in the 60s you find some people from IITs and NITs joining these programs. But later, because of the much higher salaries in the private sector, both in India and in America, most, I think, IITians stayed away from these programs. Now, of course, the program is much more highly developed, and even the salaries have improved. So this situation may be changing, but it is still more or less the same case that most IITians prefer to join private sector rather than government. Now,
और
coming back,
प्रोफेसर साहब, सॉरी सॉरी फॉर इंटरप्शन
जी
अगेन।
जी
और
जी
अभी जो है, जो करंट चेयरमैन हैं, ही इज अ
जी
ग्रेजुएट ऑफ इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ साइंस विच इज आल्सो हेडक्वार्टर्ड इन बेंगलोर।
जी
और आपने भी पहले जिक्र किया इसका, इट्स अ हाईली प्रेस्टिजियस इंस्टीट्यूशन। इट इज
जी
स्प्रेड ओवर 434 एकर्स।
जी
तो इसके बारे में भी बताइएगा। कुछ लोग ये कहते हैं कि इट इज द बेस्ट साइंस यूनिवर्सिटी इन इंडिया। फिर टाटा इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ फंडामेंटल रिसर्च,
जी
इनको कैसे कंपेयर करते हैं आप? सम
जी
पीपल से दैट टाटा इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ फंडामेंटल रिसर्च मे बी बेटर देन आईआईटीज।
Yeah, actually, their whole areas of work are different. You see, IITs were established to create engineers, whereas TIFR, as Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, was focused on theoretical physics, higher mathematics, computer science, and so on initially. So that way, their areas are different. And TIFR from very beginning has been considered as one of the best institutes in the world in these areas. And Indian Institute of Science, in fact, goes back more than 100 years. And Raman himself was there. And as I mentioned to you, even Sarabhai and Baba, who were the founders of India's space program and atomic energy program, they also worked there. So Indian Institute of Science has retained its quality, and today it is the highest ranked, consistently highest ranked Indian university in the when you compare it with world rankings. And it has done very good work both in basic sciences as well as in the engineering sciences.
और सर, इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ साइंस, सॉरी, और सर इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ स्पेस साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी, ये भी
जी
बड़ा एक हाईली प्रेस्टिजियस इंस्टीट्यूशन है। ये खुद इसरो ने एस्टेब्लिश किया 2007 में। इसके
जी
बारे में भी ब्रीफली बताइएगा।
जी शुरुआत में जैसे मैंने बताया कि स्पेस साइंसेस के बारे में, स्पेस के बारे में रिसर्च वाज गोइंग ऑन इन अहमदाबाद in physical research laboratory established by Vikram Sarabhai. But it was more towards space science. So there was no single institution where space technology was being taught or studied, because it's a multidisciplinary subject. You need all streams to be to contribute to space research. You have to be a good. You need good chemists. You need good physicists. You need good electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers. Every stream, aerospace engineers, etc. So they were recruiting from various engineering colleges, IITs, NITs, etc., from all these different fields. Then they'll be given certain training and then posted in various laboratories. Now ISRO has many dozens of centers all over India now. It has developed, and it has many places. There are three or four centers in Bangalore. There are centers in Kerala, in Trivandrum, in Mahendragiri. There is a center in Andhra Pradesh from where the rockets are launched. There is a center in Ahmedabad where the satellites are basically designed and made. And there are centers in Bangalore which also make satellites, so on. So there are several institutes where rocketry and space satellite assembly and design is being done. Plus, there are also various research institutes, including I think they used to have one in Gulmarg, in near in Kashmir, to study cosmic rays and so on. So now, excuse me, now they have a very big advanced space program. So they thought that they need their own institute to train them in specifically the kind of technologies they need. For example, they need computer scientists, IT engineers, everything. So all of them they used to recruit, but now they established this very good institute, a very elite institution near in Kerala in Trivandrum, called Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. Now, I am told that its graduates, not once they are selected, they are being given free education, free hostel facilities, everything. Okay, and in fact, the toppers among them are being sponsored by ISRO to go to Caltech. Now, Caltech, that is California Institute of Technology in Pasadena near Los Angeles, is considered the mecca of space science because there is a laboratory there called Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now, all major developments in rocketry, in space sciences, and even in physics, etc., have come from Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So now, what they are doing? I was told by recently by one of the former chairman of ISRO that they are even sponsoring, and sending the toppers from IIST to Caltech.
Okay.
Government at its own expense is sending there for PhD and postdoctoral fellowships and so on. So,
Okay.
is- and what I want to say is, initially, we didn't have rockets. Forget about satellites. We didn't even have small rockets. So initially, they got some rockets from France, from America in the 1963, 64. They were using those rockets. They are called sounding rockets. These rockets are small rockets, about a meter or a meter and a half tall. And this is what they were firing from Tumba near Kanyakumari.
Hmm.
And they will go towards high up about 20 to 100 kilometers in the atmosphere and study what is happening there and send the data back. It will just happen for 15-20 minutes, and with that data received, they will study the atmospheric conditions in the high altitudes. So that was the level of work. Then they decided that we will make our own rockets, sounding rockets. They were called Rohini rockets. So India started making their own Rohini sounding rockets. Then, unfortunately, you know that Homi Bhabha died in very mysterious circumstances in an air crash in
Yeah.
Switzerland, in
Over
Mont Blanc.
Europe.
Yeah, in
Ji.
Mont Blanc, the plane crashed and he passed away in that accident in 1966. So Sarabhai was asked to take charge of the Atomic Energy Commission also. So, and then in 69, the ISRO was formed as a separate organization, and then later, and unfortunately, Sarabhai, who had all these dreams of space program, started sending many people to NASA to for training and for studying what they are doing. What is that time? America had a small, you can say, space program related to economic needs. Now, Sarabhai was very clear from beginning that for a developing country, we are not in a race with America or Russia to go to the moon or etc. But we need to use this high technology. We need to master it to help our economic development, our agriculture, our fisheries, our weather prediction systems, our maritime navigation, and so on. So that was his developmental objective. He was very clear about that because these questions were asked at that time also in the parliament. Why should India spend money on rockets and satellites? This, we are a poor country and so on. But this is how he was able to convince Pandit Nehru and later Mrs. Gandhi and so on about this. And at the same time, with his contacts in the space international space agencies, he was able to get some of the Indian scientists trained in NASA and even in Russia and in France and so on initially. But unfortunately, he also passed away suddenly in 1971. And at that time, there was a very great aerospace scientist who was the director of Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. He was called. His name was Satish Dhawan. And if I'm not mistaken, he studied in Lahore. He came from the pre-partition Lahore, and he was a very well-known space scientist. In fact, he was a professor in Caltech, and from there he had come to Indian Institute of Science, and he had become the director. And then Mrs. Gandhi, that is Indira Gandhi, at that time Prime Minister, asked him to take charge of the space program. He said, "Look, I'll take charge provided I can continue to be in Bangalore and continue my research in Indian Institute of Science." So people say that she was very surprised that she is offering a secretary level position to head the space program to this scientist, and he is saying, "No, I'll accept it only if I'm able to continue
Mhm.
research in Indian Institute of Science." And
So he was
so,
dedicated to his profession.
absolutely, and he's a legend. He's a legend.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not many people know his name, but he's a legend. And he designed the space program later so that India can start building its own rockets and satellites.
Mhm.
He signed collaborations with France to study to develop liquid rockets. They started developing solid fuel rockets in India, and so on. As a result of that, India could launch its own satellite in 1981. 8081, it was called Rohini satellite. It was a small launch vehicle, 40 kilogram satellite. And before that, to get some experience, they made use of the Russian space program and sent one small satellite called Aryabhata, just to understand, how to build a satellite and how to control, receive a signal from here and how to control it and so on. That Aryabhata was launched by the Russian rocket. And then that was 1975. And then later, they said, we want to build satellites which look down on Earth and take pictures and let us know what is happening to the forest, what is happening to the oceans, what is happening to the crops, and so on. So these are called remote sensing satellites, or
Mhm.
also called Earth observation satellites. So they built two small satellites called Bhaskara 1. Bhaskara was a famous, you can see the names. Aryabhatta was a famous Indian mathematician. Bhaskara was a famous Indian mathematician. So these satellites were named after them. So Bhaskara 1 and Bhaskara 2 were also launched by Soviet Union. This was in 81 and 82. So after the, and another thing happened, which is that in 1975, America wanted to try an experiment where satellite can be used to do television broadcasting. Now, this
Mhm.
technology was not available. As you know, earlier in America also, they had only terrestrial TV. You
Mhm.
used to have these antennas on top of your buildings, and a local TV station from which you will receive the signal. So to do that experiment, they were looking for a large country. So India was available, but the relations between India and America were not so good. So it took some time for an agreement to be worked out. So Americans launched one satellite, communication satellite, and they said, you can use this satellite, send your television program from India up to this satellite, and then the satellite will rebroadcast it, and you can receive it everywhere. So this was called Satellite Instructional Television Experiment, SITE, SITE. This was done from Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad's,
What what year was that?
that was 1975.
Uh-huh.
And this was that satellite was used for television broadcast. And what India, it is called educational experiment because what India did is, what today we are talking about distance learning and so on. At that time, they said that we will have a lecture being given in one classroom. We'll take for that video and then send it to the satellite. Satellite will broadcast it. Then we'll set up these small community televisions in various villages in different districts of remote areas of India, and then receive those lessons. That became the basis for later satellite broadcasting all over the world. And even in India, it started very soon in 81, 82, when the Asian Games were conducted in India. This satellite broadcast also started. India started using. So there were multiple motivations. One was it was used for broadcast, for information and broadcasting, for entertainment, and then weather prediction. Now, as you know, the eastern part of India, that is Bay of Bengal, regularly there are big typhoons and cyclones there, super cyclones and so on. So a lot of damage they do all the way from Bangladesh to eastern coast of India. They do a lot of damage every year. So India started launching weather satellites, which will take picture and give you advance warning of a cyclone which is approaching, calculate its velocity and where it might land and with what speed. So the